What's up, guys? We're back at our favorite archery shop, Archery Field and Sports here in Altoona. Today we got the little fellas along with us, Miles and Camden. They're gonna learn how to shoot. We're gonna get them set up, or at least Nick's gonna get them set up. I'm gonna watch and film, right?
Yeah.
All right, let's fling a few.
Put this on. I just want to have you draw it and see how the draw length looks. So step right over here.
Flip it all the way on, and remember, like we did in the yard, keep your fingers behind the trigger.
Yep.
Nice.
So let's try to get to where your nose touches the string. Can you see through? Right there. Okay, bend your front elbow just a little so you know. Good there. Sights in the middle. Shoot it. That actually looks pretty good. All right, you're up.
All right.
No pressure.
Remember, finger behind the trigger until you got it on the target.
Yep, you shoot it. I'm gonna move the peep away.
I was like, what did I touch? Oh, not too bad. Oh, got it. Hang on, Camden, don't go down.
Wait, which one?
You gotta wait till everybody shoots.
Which one did he get?
Okay, see, now he gave you a thumbs up, he's going, now you guys go.
Me?
Nope, just Camden. But you do that so that nobody ends up down range past the shot line and gets hurt. You're gonna try to hit the middle of the blue bullseye?
Yep.
Okay. Oh. Okay. Run down there and grab it.
Clear?
All right. Give me your arrow. Go get your arrows. Trying to hit that white bullseye right there. Oop, just a little low. That's okay. Nice. You hit it, didn't you?
I'm pretty sure.
That was a bullseye, dude. I watched it.
Nice. Good shooting. All right, we got the boys' bows dialed in. I'll show you all what they're shooting. Miles has got, which one is that one? The Bear Cruiser G2. Do you like it so far?
I do. I love it.
Camden's got the Bear Royale, and they're a little bit different. The Royale is shorter axle to axle than the Cruiser that Miles has. They're both very adjustable. They've got a wide draw weight range, a wide draw length range on both of them, and the draw lengths are super easy to adjust. I was actually just in the yard a couple nights ago trying to get Miles's draw length right, and all you need is just an Allen wrench, and it's got these very adjustable cams on the top. You just pop a few screws out. You can see the measurements on the cams. Just make sure that you adjust both cams, and you're good to go. They've got sights on them, whisker biscuits, peep sights, everything, D-loops, and it was relatively easy to set up. We just brought it in here, and Nick here at Archery Field and Sports helped us out. He tied in their peeps a little bit and checked to make sure everything was running down the middle, and the boys are sighted in now. Just killed an antelope down there, didn't you?
Yeah.
You getting dialed in there, Nick?
Dialed as I can be.
Yeah.
I think it's about ready. A couple small adjustments and we're going to be ready to rock.
Hey, did you see which bow Nick has here?
Oh yeah, the hunting public bow.
The hunting public bow. That's pretty sweet.
It's just a miniature javelin.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say that. I'm a bad influence. Chuck it.
Can I?
No, you can't chuck it. Don't throw it down there.
I'm definitely not the
I'm not-
authority.
I-
Like Tim Wells out here just
Just
throwing spears down range.
you're slocking them.
Yeah. No, Miles, don't throw it.
This thing draws so smooth.
That's good. You sound like a salesman, Nick.
Yep. Sell ice to an Eskimo. Water to a fish.
No, Miles.
Just once.
No, you can't throw it down there. We got to put these away. Go sell stuff. We're already running late, boys. We got to go.
Yeah, that's true.
We got to go do our farmer's market.
Yeah.
All right, guys, we're here at the house. We got Jace Elliott here from the Iowa DNR. What's your title for the DNR?
I'm the deer research specialist for the state.
Today we wanted to talk about, well, a number of things with deer in Iowa, but main topic is CWD.
CWD, or chronic wasting disease, is just one of many diseases that's considered a TSE. That's kind of their disease group. That stands for transmissible spongiform encephalopathy, which is a mouthful. It basically just means it's a disease that transfers from organism to organism and creates sponge-like holes in the brain.
Is it like mad cow or like, what's the one that people...
Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease.
Yeah.
Yep, those are both examples of TSEs. And what makes those diseases unique is that they're not spread through a virus or a bacteria, but prion is actually the causative agent,
Right.
which is just a misfolded protein that has the ability to transmit its misfolded shape onto other healthy proteins. What these prions do is they accumulate plaque in the brain, and that leads to the holes that kind of resemble a sponge. It's definitely becoming a pressing issue with deer all over the country, and it's been about 20 years now that we've known it's been in white-tailed deer, starting in Wisconsin and Illinois.
Because when was the first case in Iowa?
2013 was the first
Okay.
year that we detected it in wild deer, and that was about 10 years after Wisconsin and Illinois detected it.
Yep.
But we were testing that whole year, or that whole decade prior, so we have a pretty good idea that that's when it showed up on the landscape.
So what's the status of it in Iowa right now?
Well, in Iowa, we, as of last year, have detected it in 12 different counties. Most of those counties are found in the northeast or south central part of the state, which just happens to also be where we have the most deer.
Yeah.
So we test every county every year, and so far have had 12 total counties test positive.
We've donated some to the sampling that our local DNR, employees.
Yeah, excellent.
They've been doing that now for a couple years.
Yes, definitely.
How long does it take to kill a deer?
So that's a good question, and it's kind of a complicated one. So you mentioned that it's 100% fatal, and that's true. If a deer is positive for CWD, it will die from that disease unless something kills it first. In other words, no deer are going to survive the disease or recover from it. That just doesn't happen as far as we know. But another interesting component about this disease is there's a pretty long incubation period, from about 16 to 36 months.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, a deer will become positive for that disease, and then it'll take 1.5 to 3 years before they become sick and eventually die. All the while, they can be spreading the disease to other healthy deer.
So the entire incubation period, they can be spreading it.
Not exactly, but right around 3 to 6 months after they've contracted the disease, they're going to be shedding prions that other deer can come in contact with. And
It just sounds like it's a really tricky one.
it is. Disease management is tough when there's that long of an incubation period. I mean, that's why most hunters that harvest CWD positive deer had no idea it was positive. They appear perfectly healthy. They're not acting weird like you see on the news, this zombie disease. You rarely will ever see a deer that's actually symptomatic, just because once they become symptomatic, they typically die very shortly afterwards.
What's the difference between CWD and EHD?
Yeah, another good question. I mean, those are probably the two most talked about and paid attention to diseases when it comes to white-tailed deer, and the reason being they both lead to dead deer, and hunters are concerned anytime that happens. But there's some really big differences between the two diseases. There's sort of the idea in the media, sometimes you see EHD talked about as a more deadly disease, but that's not true. It's not 100% fatal like chronic wasting diseases. Now, the difference between EHD and CWD is EHD is a viral disease. It's spread from biting insects that bite deer during the late summer, early fall months. And don't get me wrong, EHD can be very deadly. It does kill a lot of deer every year, and it can be catastrophic in certain areas at certain years. But it's an acute disease, meaning deer are either going to die very quickly after becoming positive, or they're going to survive the disease. The same can't be said about CWD. As far as we know, there's no deer that have ever survived the disease. We find that pretty unlikely, whereas a large number of deer do survive EHD. What's interesting is there's certain subspecies of white-tailed deer, like in Texas and the southeast, and they actually have sort of an innate resistance to the disease, meaning if they come down with EHD, there's a high likelihood, or at least a higher likelihood, that they're going to survive.
Is that because they're just exposed to it more frequently
Yeah.
down there?
Yep.
Just drier climates and they run into it more?
We believe that the reason behind that innate resistance is because the disease has probably been on the landscape longer in those areas. So if you think about it, the disease comes through a deer herd. Let's say in a terrible year it kills off 25% of the deer. Now, a lot of the deer that survived probably did get EHD, but made it through and recovered. Now they're going to have offspring that are more likely to inherit whatever conditions led them to survive. That happens enough years, and pretty soon the disease isn't as big of an issue as it is in, say, the Midwest or the Great Plains currently. I'm sure you guys are all aware of the big die-offs that happened in the Dakotas this last season, and it's likely that those deer are pretty naive to the disease. So another difference between EHD and chronic wasting disease is there's reason to be optimistic about EHD in those areas. If history's shown us anything, in 40 or 50 years, they're not going to be seeing the die-offs that they're seeing now, as is the case in Texas and the Southeast.
I see.
Now, chronic wasting disease, there's no reason to think it'll ever be less of a problem.
Right, because we haven't seen that, like we talked about
Exactly.
a while ago. Like it's continually,
Yep.
the chart looks the same.
Yeah.
It's just consistently and continually moving
Yeah.
upward and becoming more and more of a problem.
Exactly. CWDs operating in the shadows. You could have 50% prevalence on your property and you'd have no way of knowing it necessarily. Just because a lot of deer that are positive, the majority of them are going to act and look completely healthy.
You'll just start seeing these slow declines over time as it eats away at the population, I'm assuming.
That's true. What we're learning about CWD recently is that once prevalence reaches a certain threshold, it's very likely that there will be sustained declines in the population.
Okay.
So we're talking about less quantity of deer to hunt in an area. Now, it can also affect deer hunting from a quality standpoint. Not only will there be fewer deer, but you're less likely to see big antlered males, mature old deer in populations with CWD. The reason being is, think about a situation where there's a high prevalence. A male fawn, comes down with CWD early on because it's in contact with its maternal doe that has CWD, for example. The clock's ticking on that deer. It's, like I said, it takes up to 3 years to start showing signs, and then it's a very quick, rapid decline after that threshold is met. So, that deer is going to max out at about 3 years of age or so. It's not going to live much longer than that, and we know that the biggest driving factor behind antler size is age.
Right.
So if you're suppressing the top end of the age structure, you're going to have less big bucks, and that should be a real concern for hunters.
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah.
So what steps is the Iowa DNR taking to combat it at present?
So the Iowa DNR is pretty unique in the fact that we rely almost exclusively on hunters from a volunteer basis to do a lot of our heavy lifting, and we like it that way. We don't require testing, as I mentioned before. We also don't employ government sharpshooters to reduce populations. Instead, we're focusing on giving hunters the opportunity to take antlerless deer that's going to help us meet our population objectives in those areas. We manage our deer population on the county or regional scale, and we sort of set a goal range that we want to keep the trend in.
Yep.
Now, that goal range is balancing hunter opportunity and carrying capacity, trying to minimize the impacts of overabundance like vehicle collisions and crop damage, right? But it's still very important that we maintain a lot of hunting opportunity. Iowa has a rich hunting tradition, and we want to keep it that way. And we think that CWD is probably the biggest threat to that currently.
Right.
Now, we manage, like I said, deer at the low end of that population goal. That isn't to say we're trying to drive deer numbers, down to the ground, but rather we're just trying to buy enough time by keeping densities low enough that the disease will spread slower. And hopefully, in the meantime, scientists will come up with better ways to manage the disease.
Yeah, that's all we can.
That's all we can do right now.
It's like the only lever we can pull at the moment. Yeah.
Once the cat's out of the bag, it's hard to dial that prevalence down. We haven't really ever seen that.
Right.
Wisconsin was the first state to detect CWD in wild deer, and so there really was no precedent or blueprint on what to do.
Right.
Illinois detected it, if not that season, then very shortly after. However, they eventually had sort of a departure in their management structure. Illinois still does employ government sharpshooters to reduce population in endemic zones. They're suppressing their densities at a pretty low level relative to if they weren't doing anything.
I see.
There seems to be evidence that that's working and slowing the spread, whereas Wisconsin has seen a pretty rapid increase in county-wide detections and county prevalence throughout the state. Now that's not to say that any state's doing it better than the other. You know, we're all learning as we go and learning what works. And it's likely that Wisconsin is, you know, they got dealt the hand that
They
they
did.
got it
They
first.
got it first, and they got hammered with it early
Exactly.
on. So I'm sure every single situation is different in some way, shape, or form too. Because I mean, these deer across the country live in different habitats and, you know, different environments, different densities.
Yep.
I mean, just around here, we've got a lot of deer.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a bunch of deer. Bringing it back to what you were talking about earlier about the county by county management.
Right.
Those quotas are always fluctuating,
Yep,
right?
they are.
Every year
We
they
set them every
decide-
year,
Yeah.
and sometimes they go up, sometimes they go down, and that's based on, you know, our data of what the population trends are doing, as well as you know, what management biologists are seeing on the ground.
Right.
You know, this disease isn't threatening the future of deer in North America, but it is likely to change how deer hunting operates as we know it.
Yeah, it seems like it already has in Wisconsin.
Absolutely.
You know.
Absolutely. I mean, there's counties in Wisconsin where you shoot a buck over 2.5, and you're flipping a coin whether that deer has CWD.
Oh yeah. So how high is the prevalence in Iowa? Like how many counties have it, and what's the percentage of the deer that have it in those counties? You don't have to get super specific, but
So we're talking about 12 counties out of 99 in Iowa that currently have it. And as I mentioned, those are pretty geographically restricted to certain areas in the state. By and large, we haven't detected it throughout the state. This last year, we had 2 new detections in far southwestern and central Iowa, 2 new counties that showed up on the map now. But our highest prevalences are going to be in south central and northeast Iowa. And we're talking about low single-digit percentage at the most for prevalence. So we're in a much different boat than we would be in Wisconsin.
right. But they started there.
They did. And, you know, if we don't take responsible and appropriate steps, we'll inevitably get there. There's nothing stopping us from that trajectory, but we do have 20 years of knowledge behind us now that we can apply to hopefully prevent that situation.
So if you get a CWD positive deer, or I mean, this is something I've had a lot of discussions about because, like I just said, we eat most of the deer. There still is no data out there that shows that you have a high likelihood of transmitting it through a CWD positive deer. But I guess give me some info on that.
Yeah,
Can you eat the deer or not?
Yeah, so it's up to the hunter, right?
Yeah.
And you're right, there's no evidence to suggest CWD can cross the species barrier into humans. I personally wouldn't want to be the first person to find out it could,
Right.
if that answers your question.
Yeah.
I personally think that hunters should be making informed consumption decisions, and the only way to do that is testing your deer. So that's going to give you the power to decide whether you eat potentially contaminated meat, and it's also going to provide state agencies with information to help with their management. But to date, there's been no humans that have came down with CWD or any variant of it, and there's certainly a lot of people who eat it. We know that's true, and it's probably been happening for more decades than we think. So we don't know if humans can get it at this point. But it is possible, of course. So mad cow disease, like we mentioned before, is a very similar disease to CWD, and that affects bovines, cows. But it did eventually affect humans in the form of Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease.
Right.
So it wasn't exactly mad cow that people were getting, but by ingesting contaminated meat, they eventually came down with that disease. And we think that it could be possible for that to happen with CWD. It's certainly not impossible. And so the CDC does recommend that hunters who know their deer is CWD positive avoid eating it. There's maybe some other things to touch on in terms of what hunters can do for CWD in Iowa. It's sort of controversial, but the whole baiting and feeding situation, I grew up with that practice in Wisconsin, and in a lot of places it's just commonplace, and more lately it's becoming prohibited in a lot of areas. Some areas it's still allowed, but what we do know is that it does absolutely concentrate deer unnaturally in certain areas, and that will lead to increased disease transmission. So, a lot of hunters and landowners think they're doing deer a favor by, feeding them throughout the winter. When in reality, these deer have the mechanisms in place to survive harsh conditions. They've been doing it for thousands of years.
I know, we've hunted them out there in harsh conditions and we barely survived.
Exactly. Hunters or landowners, may be thinking they're doing the deer a favor, but reality, it's probably doing more harm than good.
I got you. Anything else with the deer herd and stuff you want to talk about?
Well, I can say that in Iowa, at least, which is, the information I have access to, the deer herd's, doing well. It's statewide, it's at a stable to slightly increasing level. Of course, there's regional differences that may depart from that trend. But all in all, deer are a species that, they're going strong in most parts of the country, and Iowa included.
Right. Does Iowa still do the hush program?
Yes. Yep. Iowa still does the hush program. So if you ever find yourself in a situation where you have a deer down that, maybe your freezer's getting pretty full and you can afford to do away with it and, don't have immediate friends and family in mind, then we have state programs that'll help allocate those resources towards people in need.
It's kind of a trophy buck state, if you will. So
Absolutely.
a lot of folks are focused on that.
Yep.
And that's what we've seen just, around some of the local public land that we hunt is there's a lot of does.
Right.
There's a lot of antlerless deer.
Yes.
And like the population, like you said, seems to be doing well because we see lots of young deer all the time, but there's lots of young bucks and does.
Well, what you'll find is that when deer populations are overabundant or past their carrying capacity, so to speak, or even at the high end of it, you're not going to have the quality necessarily of age structure and antler size that you would if the density was a little lower. Yeah. So you might have a lot of deer, but then you have a lot of competition for resources. Mm-hmm. Resources are what goes into antler growth, and so a lot of times you'll find the best age structures in areas that don't have very high densities. Yeah. So for hunters to help out with that, keep shooting does. Yeah. They taste great, fun to hunt, and that's mostly what I'm eating every year is does, and that's what's going to actually tip the needle in terms of population trends. You can shoot all the bucks you want, and you're probably not going to move the needle.
Well, that's what I was going to touch on, because we hunt mostly public land, and there's deer everywhere on all of it that we hunt. Yeah. And like if you're trying to kill a deer and eat good, this is a great place to do it. Yep. To go out and harvest deer for food.
Very true.
And that's something that I would encourage anybody to do that's hunting public land in Iowa, whether you're a resident or non-resident, is to get some antlerless deer tags.
Exactly.
And don't just focus on getting your trophy buck and putting in 30 days or whatever of hunting just for that deer. If you're going to be out there, really use that opportunity, because there's a lot of them.
Exactly.
I mean, we had a blast doing that last year. I don't know how many does we killed, but we probably ate close to 10 of them total.
That's awesome.
Just in our group alone.
Yeah. You can't beat it.
Yeah, it's awesome. Like you said, they're good to eat, and it gets you. A lot of people want to wait for the rut to hunt, when bucks are more active, but anymore we've been hunting more and more early part of the season, and that's what we do. We go out and we shoot a few does here and there.
For sure.
Depends on how far back there they are.
Yeah, that's true.
We might only kill one if it's a mile and a half back somewhere.
Sometimes the antlers help the motivation for the drag back, that's for sure. Yeah. And to touch on what you're saying in Iowa, everyone that has looked into non-resident hunting in Iowa can realize it's unique in the fact that it can take years to draw certain tags in certain zones. However, there's almost always antlerless tags to buy year after year. So if someone's interested in hunting Iowa who doesn't live here and just wants to, see what it's all about, come and buy a doe tag until you draw a buck tag.
Man, I'd recommend that anyway.
Absolutely.
If you were investing in 3, 4, 5 years to come here and eventually hunt, if you come here every year just to hunt for does, you're going to gain so much knowledge on that property that you're hunting, whether it's public or private, that it's going to aid you when you do get your buck tag.
For sure. For sure.
Versus not even setting foot here.
Exactly.
And then getting the tag and then being like, okay, I got to go now,
You'd be doing yourself a favor and, the whole deer management program a favor as well.
Yeah, I mean, there is some people that come out here and scout. I mean, there's a lot of folks that come here and shed hunt.
Right.
you know, from other states. If you're spending the gas money already and the time to come down here,
Exactly.
it wouldn't hurt you to
No.
spend some time in the woods and shoot some antlerless deer.
Very true. And we have counties that we have excess doe tags year after year. I mean, there's always somewhere to shoot does in the state.
Yeah, we never have issues getting
No,
doe tags.
I believe that.
Yeah, there's always plenty left
Yep.
over. It was a good conversation.
Absolutely.
Appreciate you coming
Yeah,
down and
appreciate you having
enlightening me about all this stuff.
My pleasure.